set the tone for you. Remember, the gospel writer John writes a number of books in the New Testament. He's number 2. Paul's number 1. He's number 2 for the number of books in the Bible. Yeah, thank you. There is, John writes, John's one of those writers that writes so that you know it's him, but he doesn't want to say it's him. So he writes a lot of things. In fact, some of what Barb is going to read for us in a moment will be kind of that, he's in third person, but he wants to tell you he's in first person kind of thing. John also has some details in his gospel that are different than Matthew, Mark, and Luke. And so it's helpful to read all the gospels, but John is very good to read for this particular story, those details. Okay. Now, what I want you to think about as you hear this today, Jesus has appeared to pretty much all the disciples by this point. He has appeared to all the 11 remaining disciples. He appears today, and there's only 7 of them here. And because they are in this state, they're in this place in their ministry where they really aren't sure what's going on, and they're still confused a little bit. So they go back to what they know. For many people, we do the same thing. I mean, when life gets a little difficult, we go do something that we're familiar with, we're comfortable with. For me, sometimes I go to my shop. Right? For some people, they go hunting. For others, they go fishing. For some, they read a book. They go for a walk, whatever. In this case, Peter says to his buddies, I'm going to go fishing. And a number of them were fishermen to begin with. So they go off and they go fishing. Now, because of the way it's written, John's giving you kind of some details, like 153 fish and great details, right? Jesus is there early in the morning. Most of the fishermen in this part of the Sea of Galilee, they fished at night. They fished at night. The particular type of fish they were catching, they would often hang a lantern at the end of the boat. It would attract the fish up. Okay? It would attract them to the light, and then they would cast their nets or throw their nets in and then sweep up the fish that way. And they always went to the left side of the boat. In this case, Jesus, they didn't recognize him. They were about 100 yards offshore, and he hollers out to them, have you any fish? And of course, it's early in the morning, the sun's coming up, and they are frustrated because they went out so they could just get their minds off the stuff, and nothing happens. All night long, they didn't catch anything. So, frustrated, he says, cast your nets on the right side of the boat. And they thinking, who is this guy? But they do it, right? And they catch a huge load of fish. And Peter is impetuous, and he is. He jumps in the water, swims in, the rest of them drag the fish in. And now we're at the ready where Jesus had some bread ready, and he was already had some fish that he was cooking. But he said, bring some fish. So he invites them to have breakfast. Now they're beginning to know this is Jesus, okay? Barbara, you ready?
Mm-hmm.
Go ahead, please.
After breakfast, Jesus said to Simon Peter, Simon, son of John, do you love me more than these others? Yes, Peter replied, you know I am your friend. Then feed my lambs, Jesus told him. Jesus repeated the question, Simon, son of John, do you really love me? Yes, Lord, Peter said, you know I am your friend. Then take care of my sheep, Jesus said. Once more he asked him, Simon, son of John, are you even my friend? Peter was grieved at the way Jesus asked the question this third time. Lord, you know my heart. You know I am, he said. Jesus said, then feed my little sheep. When you were young, you were able to do as you liked. You go wherever you wanted to. But when you are old, you will stretch out your hands, and others will direct you and take you where you don't want to go. Yeah. Jesus said this to let him know what kind of death he would die to glorify God. Then Jesus told him, "Follow me." Peter turned around and saw the disciple Jesus loved following, the one who had leaned around at supper that time to ask Jesus, "Master, which of us will betray you?" Peter asked Jesus, "What about him, Lord? What sort of death will he die?" Jesus replied, "If I want him to live until I return, what is it to you? You follow me." So the rumor spread amongst the brotherhood that the disciple wouldn't die. But that isn't what Jesus said at all. He only said, "If I want him to live until I come, what is that to you?" I am that disciple. I saw these events and have recorded them here. And we all know that my account of these things is accurate. And I suppose that if all the other events in Jesus' life were written, the whole world could hardly contain the books.
Thank you. Barbara, what is your translation?
The Living Word.
The Living Word, okay. And so you've been helpful in that. You just have to try to remember what she's written, okay? Because we're going to get into a little bit of a technical aspect today. And I put them on your outline so you'd be familiar with them. The reason that we go deep into this today, particularly in the Greek translation, is because it really does mean something. We have often taught this lesson, and it's not incorrect if you've heard it taught this way. It's perfectly legitimate to kind of talk about the fact that, Jesus asked Peter 3 times because Peter denied him 3 times. Remember when Peter was in the courtyard of the high priest and Jesus was under trial. Jesus had already predicted to Peter, he said, you will deny me 3 times before, some of your translations say, before the cock crows. So the cock crowing, you think in terms of a rooster, that's fine. But they had a terminology for when the guards on the city gates would announce time. And it was considered the same as when a rooster would crow, right? So when the cock crowed for the 3rd time, it'd be 6 a.m., all right? And so that would be the announcement that basically it's daybreak, okay, to the city. In Muslim countries today, they ring bells or they blow trumpets to indicate time of prayer, right? It's kind of traditional in the Middle East. And so here's what happens so that as we're going to go into this, I'm going to go a little bit deep into some of the translations so it will help you to see really the deep meaning here, okay? So there's really, I believe, 6, maybe 7 words that the Greeks use for love. We want to go into 4 today. The first one on your outline is storge, which would be familial love. It's like family love, okay? In your family, you have storge love. The Greeks, remember, have a better way of defining certain words than we do. We just say, oh yeah, I love ice cream. I love my wife. I love my dogs. I love my work. You get it? Okay. Yeah. No, I wouldn't say I can ask. But some of you rednecks would. But anyway, so we'd say I love these things, right? Well, I hope that I love my wife more than I do ice cream. Yeah, I do.
Yeah, it depends on the place.
I wanted to be sure. I wanted to be sure. I'm not going to tell you it's Ken Marshall. I'm not going to tell you. Okay, so storge is familial love. Okay, the next one is eros. That is a root word that we get from erotic. Okay, eros is more of physical or sexual love, and then we have phileo or philea. Phileo is like brotherly love. Remember Philadelphia, the word or the city Philadelphia is a Greek word, right? The city of brotherly love. So phileo, okay? And finally, agape. Now, agape is a word that we use a lot in the Christian language in the church setting. And what does agape mean? Okay, unconditional is a great definition, but there's also one I want you to be aware of, and it's called, what's that?
How Christ loved.
How Christ loved, and then also sacrificial love. Okay, sacrificial love. All right, sacrificial love. Unconditional, like Christ loved, sacrificial love. Okay. Now, the reason I do that is because, again, it's really important that as Americans with limited capacity for English, like we all have, the English make fun of us because, we have a limited use of the English language compared to the people in the UK, or at least they believe we do. And then when you look at other languages, there are some better wordings than what we have. So I just want you to be aware of that. Now, quickly, because we have to move here, it throws people off. Why are 3 times important? So it's considered in the Middle East during this time, and even to today to a great degree. And in Jesus' time, it wasn't called Israel, it's called Palestine. The Romans called it Palestine, okay? Which is different than Palestine today, all right? It's a bigger area. It's basically, back in those days, it would be about half of what modern day Syria would be, all of Israel, all of Palestine,
Jordan.
a little bit of Jordan in there, a little bit of Libya, but anyway, that was Palestine to the Romans. Okay, so in Jesus' day of Palestine, it was known that if you said something 3 times, it was considered by you to be the law. Okay, so if I stated something 3 times, I'm testifying to you that I know this is truth. I know it's my truth, and I believe it, right? So 3 times has some meanings here, right? So remember, on your outline, I put Peter disowned Jesus 3 times, remember, in the courtyard, okay? And then Jesus turns around and asks Peter 3 times, do you love me? Right? So look at the reflection. Jesus had predicted to Peter that you would disown me 3 times. Peter said, I'll die for you. And Peter runs away, okay? And then Jesus comes along and basically reunites Peter to him. Not because Jesus had stepped away, but Peter had stepped away. So look at the pattern. God recognizes that we human beings will step away from him. And yet here Jesus approaches Peter, sits down and has breakfast, and after they're done with breakfast, instead of talking about the events of the day, Jesus immediately looks at Peter and says, Simon, son of John. Now, it's important you recognize that is a formal title. Okay? It'd be Jesus looking at me and saying, Douglas Clay Rinker, do you love me? See what I'm saying? Simon, son of John was a legal title. If they were talking as friends, he would have just said Simon, or he called him Peter, right? Petra is really the Greek translation of Peter. And he would say, Simon, do you love me? He didn't say it. He said, Simon, son of John. It's a very formal introduction, right? So he's making sure he understands that he's looking at him, all right? He's using his full name here, his full title, what legally he would go by. Do you love me? All right, now let's go back. These 3 questions are kind of interesting because if you note, Peter and his buddies have kind of temporarily stepped away from ministry and they've gone back to their occupation, okay? They're comfortable doing this. There's confusion in their life, and there's some dysfunctionality in the way they're understanding God at this point. And so what do? Boys, let's go back to what we are comfortable with, what we grew up with, what we know, right? It was easier out there in the boat. And so they kind of done that. I want you to think a little bit. Sometimes in our walk with God, it becomes a little uncomfortable, so we have a tendency to go back to our old ways. And so look what he says to Simon Peter, or Simon, son of John, do you love me more than these? Now, we don't know if he is pointing to the other disciples, or we don't know if he's pointing to the boat, or to the ocean, and to the fish. But what's he doing to Simon?
having to make a choice.
Yeah, he's kind of pulling him back into understanding this isn't what you're called to do. That's why he's asking the questions. Do you love me more than these? But sometimes God looks at us and says, when you're sitting on your front porch maybe and you're really proud of what you have, and maybe God sometimes says to you, do you love me more than this? And you have your checkbook in your hand, things are looking pretty good. Maybe he says, do you love me more than this, right? More than your checkbook. Do you love me more than the pictures that are on your sideboard, maybe, of your family? He's asking those questions sometimes of us, right? He's asking Peter this. You love me more than these. And then, so really what he's dealing with, and I put this is changing Peter's life, because the first time he's saying, do you love me more than these? He's taking him back from a fisherman to a disciple again. He's talking about his occupation. And then the second question, he skipped down. He said, Simon, son of John, do you love me? It's interesting because you remember Peter's known as being what? Impetuous, right? He just, what's up here comes out here. There's no filter. There's no blocking that, right? It just comes out. And Peter gets himself in trouble. If you remember in the Garden of Gethsemane, when the soldiers come, most Jews carried a little short, kind of a knife. It would be a little bit longer than a knife, short sword, and they carried it in their clothes. They would compete with it. It would be protection, whatever the case may be, and so like a pocket knife, right, for many of us guys. And they carried it, and impetuous Peter, he pulls the sword out, the knife out, and he swings to kill somebody, one of the guards, and he just cuts off the guy's ear, right? Jesus heals the ear and goes on. And then Peter runs. Okay, so Mr. Impetuous Peter. And so the second question really points to this impetuous to the rock. Okay, so he's talking about Peter's identity. He's trying to get Peter to understand his identity. Do you really love me? Okay, third one is the concept here is, he says it again, Simon, son of John. Now, the reason that you may not be getting this is because the Greek translation really lays out more detail. We're going to go into a little bit of that here in a minute, all right? But he's kind of taking him from guilty to forgiven, okay? So we're dealing with occupation, identity, and understanding. And there's where maybe you can draw in your own personal life here. God wants to remind you what your occupation is. He wants to remind you what your identity is, and he wants to remind you of your understanding of him. So again, unfortunately, the English language, when you read this, it looks like Jesus pretty much asking the same three things, right? But his response is, the first thing is, feed my lambs. The second is, take care of my sheep. And the third one is, feed my sheep. Then he tells him how he's going to die. Ultimately, tradition says that Peter is led away to be crucified. And Peter says that I'm not worthy to be crucified like my Lord was. So they crucified him upside down. Okay, he was still crucified, but upside down. All right, so and so it's you hear this. You'll stretch out your hand. Somebody else will dress you. In other words, somebody else will put the clothes on, your death clothes. Those aren't the kind of clothes you want to wear. You don't want to die this way, but Jesus is predicting that, okay? So really think in your life about the fact of your occupation, your identity, and your understanding. Jesus doesn't call you away from your occupation. He just wants to remind us that whatever you think your occupation is, you also have a role in this church, in relationship, okay? Now, look at verse 15. Again, I'm not a Greek guy, but I use it, what's called, you Google it, an translational or interlineal translation of the Bible, and it will give you a breakdown of multiple languages. One of those is Greek, and then you can really see for yourself. So look at verse 15. When he asks this, when Jesus says, Simon, son of John, he really says in Greek, do you agape me? Do you unconditionally, self-sacrificially love like I do? Okay. And it's interesting because Peter's response is different. In fact, Barbara's translation is one that kind of goes through that better than most of the others do. And Peter's answer is, yes, Lord, you know that I phileo you. I love you like a brother. So what's Jesus' question? Do you unconditionally, self-sacrificially love me? And Peter's response is, well, you know I love you. I love you like a brother. See, the response doesn't meet. So it's I say, Katie, do you love me? And she says, I love you like Dutch chocolate ice cream. Okay. And I immediately know that, yeah, that's affection, but that's not really love. Okay? All right. You get it? And that's what Peter's done here. Now, Peter's impetuous. I don't know, he's probably just trying to give Jesus an answer, right? He's just trying to give him an answer. But there's a separation in this answer. Peter, do you love me unconditionally, self-sacrificially? Do you love the way I love? Peter says, I love you like a brother.
What?
I love you like a brother. See? And there's a gap there. Because loving like a brother doesn't mean it's always unconditional and self-sacrificial, right? It's a break there. Okay. And then verse 16, Jesus again says, Simon, son of John, do you agape me? And again, his answer, if you look at the true Greek translation, is he says, you know that I love you like a brother. I phileo you. Okay. So again, Peter misses the mark. He misses that mark, and Jesus asked him a third time now, okay? And this is an interesting twist, okay? And because if you look at the Greek translation, he says the third time, Simon, son of John, do you even call me a friend? Simon, son of John, are you really my friend? Is the way he asked. Unfortunately, again, in the English language, says 3 times we just go, doesn't make any sense. Jesus keeps saying, do you love me? Is Jesus not that sharp anymore? I mean, in his risen body, is he not? He is. It's just we missed the translation. So again, he's saying in verse 17, third time he said to him, Simon, son of John, do you even love me like a brother? Do you even love me like a friend? Am I even your friend? Some real heavy translations will say it that way. Am I even your friend? And that's why Peter was hurt. That's why you see, if you get the real translation here, that's why you see Peter was hurt, because Jesus asked him again, are you even my friend? So we have to remember that God asks us sometimes questions in our lives, and we sometimes ask God questions. But those questions, sometimes we keep asking them the same way. He keeps giving us the same answer. And so don't be discouraged if during your prayer time it seems like I keep talking to God about this and nothing happens. Because God shows a pattern here. Jesus shows us a pattern that he'll answer our questions. He's going to ask questions of us, but the questions are deeper than we usually think. You want to go get some ice cream? Oh, I love ice cream. Okay. So we just have a tendency to think on such a surface level. Okay. And when I say superficial, please, if you're hurt by that, I don't necessarily mean it to hurt you. I do mean it to challenge you. A lot of times we say to people, oh man, I love you like a brother. And when they really need something, it's like, well, I can't do that. We really mean I'm not doing that, or I don't want to do that. I'm not willing to give that much. I'm not willing to invest that much, right? So we have to appreciate that. Now, I asked this question of you. So what's our response to God's love supposed to be? What's our response to God's love supposed to be? You just kind of got the impression of what Jesus really asked in Simon Peter, right? So what's our response supposed to be?
I think we should show him. He knows our heart. We need to show it in our actions. Maybe that's what he wants us to do and be his hands and feet. So it's more of our actions. Our hearts should come out in our actions.
Yeah, there was I can tell you a real true story. A local mover and shaker was in my office years ago, and he said, you know, I know this is important to you and the company, Doug. We'd like to see your support. And I said, you're right, it is important to us. And he said, well, how important is it? How big's the checkbook? So when you say to other people, God is important to me, my relationship to Jesus matters. What if they say, how much does it matter? How do you answer that? How important is it to you? How much time are you willing to invest? How much energy are you willing to invest? How much love are you willing to invest? How much money are you willing to invest? Whatever it is that you're called to, so how important is it to you? How big's the check on it? Forget money. How much time are you going to invest? How much hurt are you willing to endure? If you really love Jesus, what are you willing to put up? So what's our response to God's love supposed to be? Another way that I've heard it said is everything. I don't know if I know anybody who I would consider really in the service of Christ who have told me, God said, empty my account out, sell everything, give it to the poor, and do this. Maybe there are people like that. So I don't think God has intentions of you just turning your checkbooks in today and your credit cards in today and selling everything you have and piling it on the floor. I don't think that's God's intention. But when we use the term, what's our response to God's love supposed to be? Everything, meaning everything is on the table. Everything is on the table. Have you ever helped somebody that you just agape love, that you know you'd be willing to do whatever? If they came to you and said, I need $300 in cash this afternoon, you'd find a way of getting it, right? I need to live with you for a week. That you would say, come on in. I'll sleep on the couch, you sleep in my bed. I mean, have you ever been to that point where you will do whatever it takes because you love them that much? And that's what God says, be willing. Doesn't mean you have to, but when we get to the point where our hearts are willing to do things for God, then we become usable to God. If the mouth just opens and shuts and says, oh, I love Jesus and I believe in God, and then nothing happens, we aren't really willing to give everything.
Is
So-
the question more though, would you be willing to do something for people you know you do not necessarily love? You're going to do a lot for someone you love, but how about are you gonna just help someone you met that needs the help?
Or don't even know.
Yeah.
Or don't even know. There's a lot of people in this world who have written checks and donated things to the Ukrainian relief effort, right? And that's good. I don't know how much they gave, doesn't matter, it's up to them. They don't know those people. So they were willing to give whatever, that much or this much or this much, and they did, right? They gave it to people that they don't even know. They just see a picture on the news.
Well, we had the one GI that went over there and died, American GI.
So we're willing to give. How much? You have to decide that, right? Again, Doug's not telling you to sell everything that you have and pile it on the floor. But we're willing to say to God that it's all yours, God. Show me how to use it. All my talent is yours, my time is yours, my money is yours, my everything that I have is yours. God will instruct you how to use it. Doug's not going to instruct you because I'll screw it up. Don't trust me with that. Don't trust me with that. But trust God with it, okay? So what's your response? We got to move quickly. What's your response? You have to figure that one out. So here's a challenge for you this week. Pray about what your response should be to the challenges God is placing in front of you. And I don't know what that is for you. I honestly don't know what that is for you. And that's not a cop-out. That's not Doug waving his arms and saying it's all on you. I'm just saying it's something I struggle with, okay? But it is an important thing to pray about. And then I want you to know that Jesus is asking for action, not speculation. He's challenging Peter through questions. He's challenging Peter through questions for action, not speculation. I don't want to know what you think, Peter. I want to know what you're going to do. Okay, you tell me you love me like a brother, that's fine. That's fine. What are you going to do about it, right? Are you keep going fishing? Or are you going to go where you've been called? Okay. Jesus asks us to follow even when we don't feel his presence. He's saying, Peter, I want you to do these things. And he's leaving. Jesus is about to ascend now, and he won't be back. All right? So even when you don't feel God's presence, you're still called to do something. Now, how does Peter follow Jesus when he's physically gone? Power of the Holy Spirit. Same way we do. I haven't eaten fish and bread at breakfast with Jesus. I haven't physically done that. But he's still here, right? He's still present in my life. And then verses 22 through 25, I love this because you may not be, but I am. I really want to be in the know. I want to see what's happening. I love the fact that I attempt to look what we call in the corporate world around the corner. I want to see what's around the corner, right? And I don't know what to see it, but I'm trying to predict. I study economics a lot so that I can trend and track where the economy's going. And I love to know what's going to happen or predict what's going to happen in 6, 12, 18, 24 months. And strategically at the company, I was always responsible for a 5 and a 25-year plan. Always thinking 25 years out, okay? That's what I love to do. And I love to try to figure out what's God doing with this, right? It's important that we recognize, though, that sometimes God says to me, if I want to do this, what's that to you? It sort of sounds like Jesus saying to Peter, it's none of your business. And you could read that, and I'm not sure you'd be wrong. I want you to see the deeper meaning. And that is that Jesus saying to him, I have the plan. I want you to have the purpose. You figure out what your purpose is, I got the plan. For those of us who like to be in control, which I look around the room knowing many of you, that's most of us, if not all of us, we want to be in control. And so we want to know, this is my purpose and this is the plan. God is basically saying to Peter here, if I want this guy, if I want John to remain alive till I come again, what's that to you? Jesus saying, it's my plan, it's not yours. You have a purpose. In fact, in my personal study time this week, I actually saw that and it became clear to me that God is saying to me in my prayer time, Doug, you worry about the purpose. I have the plan. Determine what your purpose is, because I've got the plan. So that means that God's in charge. God's in control. He's figured it out. It's not up to me. It's up to me to be the player in the game, right? The coach has figured it out. He has the game plan. He wants me to perform in my position. And so plan versus purpose. Now, we got to end. Will you follow Jesus the way he asked? Not the way necessarily you want to, but the way he asked. Are you willing to be the purpose that Jesus called you to? Do you agape me? Self-sacrificially, unconditionally love the way Jesus loved versus just love you like a friend. Let's end the word. Heavenly Father, thank you for challenging us today to love others the way that you love us, to have a purpose in your kingdom because you have the plan. Help us to find our purpose. Help us to be willing to invest it all. In Jesus' name. Amen.